Thank you to our sponsors for today's video, InfyPower, Eaton, and Ionna. InfyPower is the largest EV charger module provider with over 3 million power modules running reliably worldwide. Their latest G2 collection features ultra-high power density and efficiency for EV charging and energy storage. InfyPower, innovation for your power. Also, Eaton. Eaton is a one-stop shop for implementing reliable and innovative EV charging infrastructure at your site. Across all applications, Eaton's EV charging infrastructure, hardware, and software gives you the scalability, flexibility, and intelligence you need to charge today and scale up tomorrow. Learn more at eaton.com/EVCI. And Ionna, North America's premier charging network. With unmatched commitment to elevating the customer experience, Ionna is opening America's roads to all EVs, giving drivers the coverage they need, the reliability they deserve, and the amenities they crave.
Hello there! I know, it's a Star Wars reference. Actually, it is pronounced Telo like hello, for those who are wondering. But I am here in the Bay Area, out in California, finally looking at the Telo. This is the MT1, the new small electric truck that one of the new small electric trucks that everyone's been talking about. And I'm really excited to actually check this out and bring it to you guys on the channel. We haven't really covered Telo very much yet, but now that they have an actual functioning prototype driving around, I'm here to bring you a full tour and also talk about what they've done, but also some of their intentions moving forward. I want to have Jason, the CEO, on, actually drive this thing. It should be a fun time. So, I know, no matter how this video goes, if I praise the hell out of the Telo and be like, this is the best thing ever, the naysayers will say, they're never going to make it to production. If I am going into this super critically and saying they'll never make it to production, then everyone who's really excited and a reservation holder and has been following them will say, I'm wrong about that. So there's keyboard warriors all over the place. I'm just excited to share what seems to be in front of me, which is actually a physical Telo. Now, yes, I said prototype early on. So that's what I'm going to keep in my head this whole video. I'm not going to assess, final driving dynamics and all that stuff. That's not the point of this video. The point is really showing the uniquities, new word, of this truck.
Hi, Editor Jordan here. This video was thrown together pretty last minute and I had very limited time with the truck, so I'll be inserting a few thoughts here and there. But as we get into this, let's keep in mind Telo's own claim from their website. Toyota Tacoma capability, Tesla-like range and efficiency in the footprint of a Mini Cooper. Curious that they didn't mention like lucid range and efficiency, but as someone who really likes my Tesla Model 3 base model, which seems to be on average slightly more efficient than lucid, at least in my experience, that's probably a good metric. But they say it's the most compact, practical, and technically advanced truck. Compact, yes. Practical, sure. Especially given the footprint. Technologically advanced, that's a claim that we'll have to wait and see until we actually get our hands on a production truck, because this truck in this video, we really can't see anything with the software. We don't have an actual grasp on efficiency and stuff because it doesn't have final production battery or motor tuning and all that. So technologically advanced with ADAS, all those things, we'll have to wait. But let's jump right in now with Jason, the CEO, to get a good first look at the Telo truck.
Jason, welcome to Out of Spec.
Thanks for coming.
This is the CEO and one of the co-founders of Telo.
That's right.
Seems like a really fun team, small team, only a handful of employees, which also makes it like I walked in here earlier and they're like, we got lunch, someone's birthday, someone had a cake. Like it was like actually fun, tangible team environment. Intimate, I think was the word you described.
Yeah, every time I walk in the front door, I always have a big smile on my face. I'm like, what did I do in my past life to deserve to be working here?
That's awesome. So really quick backstory. I want to talk, first of all, what is the name?
Telo.
Where did that come from? And
yeah, it's a Greek word that the long version of that word is telos. You add an S to the end of it. That means purpose.
Okay.
So we really wanted to do everything for a purpose. This is a purpose-built truck for hard to reach areas in downtown cities and things like that. My background, I'm half Greek or Macedonian Greek. My mother's got a very Greek name. My son, I gave the name Apollo to.
Nice.
So the Greek kind of pantheon, echelon runs deep in my family.
That's awesome. Well, cool. And yeah, again, small company, but also a lot of experience from the company. You've had experience with EV stuff. Forrest is the CTO.
Yes.
And he, helped develop the first Roadster battery. He was early Tesla days, which by the way was like built somewhere right over here.
Building right next to us back there.
Right over there. So a lot of experience, which I think is something when people are questioning / doubtful of a new startup, you kind of have to look at, okay, is this worth questioning? Because you just think, oh, everyone's making EV startups now. Let's just throw our hat in the ring and see if it works. Or there's the route where you have actual expertise and experience and you're trying to take maybe a slightly different route.
Yeah.
So,
but I think the first and foremost thing is, are you building something valuable?
Right.
And something that is actually providing a unique value to customers. And that was really core to what we were doing. Beyond that, though, I think that we have a team of people that have done a lot of this before. And if for things that we don't know, we've surrounded ourselves with people that have done it before. So not just Forrest and myself and Eve that are part of the team, but also both founders of Tesla have invested in the company. Mark Tarpening sits on our board and gives us almost daily kind of feedback on the decisions we're making. Andy Palmer was the ex-CEO of Aston Martin. He is the one who brought the Nissan Leaf to life as a CEO of Nissan. Well, we have a question, call him up on the phone and go, hey, what did you at this time when you were at Nissan or Aston Martin? How do we solve this problem?
Right. That makes a big difference, having either the solutions or a means to get the solutions done. And I also want to talk, building this thing.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are wondering, well, first of all, do you have investors and money? Like people worry about that with startups. You just said you do have actual investors. You're not even a publicly traded company. You're not like messing with that yet.
Not even close, yeah.
And you're also not, trying to spin up this crazy factory to do hundreds of thousands a year. What's the production strategy rolling out?
Well, there's a graveyard of electric vehicles that came before us. We're hyper aware of that.
Yeah.
And a lot of the story of those companies comes from trying to get to high volume scale to compete with the big three at the volumes the big three create. But doing that right out of the gates is an untenable project. You have to make decisions that cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and if that's the wrong decision, you've just thrown away and effectively lit hundreds of millions of dollars on fire.
Right.
So if you look at some of the most successful automotive companies throughout history, they didn't start that way. They started building single units, tens of units, hundreds of units, thousands of units. Even Tesla, their first Roadster, they built 2,400 of them. And that was their entry point into the market. Then came the S, which was tens of thousands, and then came their high volume products and vehicles. Our strategy has always been, how do we get to unit profitability break even at low and mid volumes of vehicle development? And every decision we make is towards that in mind.
Right. You are a Tacoma owner.
I do drive a Tacoma over there.
And so I wanted to ask also, it seems like we're in this era where everyone wants an SUV. SUVs are huge sellers, but it's also somewhat of a saturated market. Every SUV launch I go to, one was last week, I make the joke of like, oh, another one. Did we really need this? So tell everyone why you went with a truck first, and was that your original intention, or were you, Rivian was like, oh, we're gonna do a sports car, and then they pivoted to truck. What was the truck story leading up to this?
Yeah, actually, we started the company not even thinking about four wheels. Forrest and I were both thinking about two wheels. And thinking about two wheels in different areas, we were thinking, how do we improve city transportation through the smallest means necessary? Forrest's kind of bet was on scooters.
Yeah.
My bet was on motorcycles. Both of those bets didn't plan out, but they informed the decisions we were making. We went and talked to the people that live in downtown cities, that live all around us, and said, what is your biggest pain point? It's like, well, I like to go snowboarding, or I like to go mountain biking, and I live in downtown San Francisco or downtown LA, and I would never buy a big truck. I wouldn't buy a big SUV, and I certainly wouldn't buy a truck.
Yeah.
Because I just can't fit it in the city.
Right.
But you know what I really want? I grew up with a truck. I love the idea of a truck. I love the ability that my friends who have trucks, and I call them up on the weekend, they help me move. They're everyone's best friend. Everyone has a truck friend in downtown city. I'm that truck friend in downtown San Francisco.
People call you when they're moving?
Exactly. You're everyone's best friend. Beers or whatever you want,
right,
to help them. And so we were like, oh man, we really stumbled into this idea of we could build, using the same type of core principles we developed for our smaller form factor of vehicles, these two-wheel vehicles, we could build four-wheel vehicles and really rethink the form and footprint of it to fit in a downtown city. I drive a truck. I will always drive a truck. I have a giant dog. I go snowboarding and mountain biking. I love my truck. I love having an open bed and the ability to throw things in and out of it and not worry about getting the rest of the vehicle dirty. But I am so stressed out every time I try to go find a parking spot in San Francisco, and this was the solution to that.
Right. With some of the other big trucks, we are big truck fans here out of spec. We, of course, have a Rivian. We had a Cybertruck. It's gone now. had a lot of issues, but they're great. They're very functional. They're useful. They're not efficient. You know, if you go road trip a Rivian or something, even a Rivian, which is, you know, not a huge behemoth of a truck like you would see on a Hummer or Silverado, it's not cheap to drive that thing. If you have home charging, that does make it cheaper, but if you rely on DC fast charging in the public, where it could be 50, 40, 60 cents a kilowatt hour, that suddenly becomes like the same cost as a gas truck.
Yeah,
which is pretty crazy. So I guess let's look at this truck, because that's why we're here. And I think it's a really interesting design. And a lot of people have called it like, oh, it's the American K truck. Not quite.
We have a K truck right over there.
Yeah, actually, look over there. There's a hidden K truck. It's not quite the K truck. I guess if we go around this side, we could probably see better. But this is small. Mini Cooper length is what has made all the headlines. 152 inches. 5 inches shorter than my Miata.
That's right.
Which blows my mind. But that does make it, you know, easily maneuverable. But also, interestingly, a fairly long wheelbase for the size of vehicle.
Yeah.
So we're talking 152 inches long, but it is a bit wider and taller than a Mini Cooper, which helps with the function.
That's right.
It's what, like 60, I forget the dimensions exactly.
53 inches wide.
Okay, yeah.
67 inches tall.
Okay, so it is shorter than a K truck, well, height-wise.
Yeah, there's some K cars that are smaller, obviously.
Right, yeah.
The K trucks generally sit up pretty upright.
Yeah. And you're also not quite above the wheels like you would be in some K trucks.
When we started designing this concept of the vehicle, we started on a first principles approach and said, what is the minimum frontal crash safety zone we need to get 5-star crash test rating?
Right.
And then we said, okay, if that's where that needs to be, where does the occupant have to be to get 2 6'2" tall individuals, front and rear of one another, and then what has to be true to actually then package a 5-foot bed? And when that all came together, we ended up with this form factor, and it just so happened to be the same footprint. We like, okay, what vehicle is 152 inches long? Well, a Mini Cooper, that's perfect. That's the headline, we've got it.
Right, that makes sense, which has Mini in the name. But I think if you do look at this, like, it's not quite, like, you kind of feel like you are sitting at the very front of the car, but there is actually a decent amount of structure here, like you said, that is crash structure. That's important. You don't have a frunk. You're not messing with the frunk.
No.
A lot of people say they really, really care about frunks. I do understand that, but when you have compromises in other ways, for example, having a very useful bed and 4 doors for 5 seats, that suddenly becomes not so much.
And we still have locked storage underneath the bed as well.
So no frunk, which also, you know, if you throw stuff in a frunk, that could be an issue in a crash.
Yeah, you know, I've in all my years of safety in vehicles, there's really not a lot of great documentation around what happens if I put a metal box in my frunk and get into a crash with that, and how that plays in. We talked about K cars. There's actually a storied history on the AutoZam AZ1.
Ooh.
One of the most famous K cars of all time.
Favorite cars of all time.
Yeah, amazing car. If you go buy one now, you'll notice that the spare tire sits behind the passenger. But it used to sit in the frunk.
Okay.
And there's still a place for it in the frunk. And the problem with it was that, and I'm not sure if it actually ever happened, but the risk was that when you get into a frontal accident, that tire would come up and decapitate the driver.
Wow, not good. Any spare tire on this or plans for it that you know of?
We do plan on having a small spare tire in it. We really looked at a way to do a full size, but packaging has always been a concern of what we're doing. We weren't willing to compromise on the monster tunnel to do that.
Right, you're trying to package it really, really well. It is very interesting having the tire be one of the front things. So
it's an inch behind the front bumper.
So your approach angle, like, it almost feels like infinite.
It's pretty good. But you know, people have always said that it's going to be great off-road. I want to be very clear on what this vehicle can't do.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have a gigantic breakover angle.
Right.
So you could get yourself into a spot just to get stuck later if you really wanted to.
Right. Yeah, it's 10 inches of ground clearance, and these are not the biggest wheels. Not bad though. It's like, what, 27-inch total tire?
That's right. Yep.
So not crazy. You're not talking 35s, but again, look at this.
Yeah, and you know, we've taken it off-roading into the beach, and the 4-wheel capability with the limited slip in there, air down the tires. You pretty much you have to try to get stuck.
Right. And I'm curious where this kind of design language came from. You know, you start to see all the sort of pill shapes.
Yeah.
Robert from Aging Wheels behind the camera, of course, was like, when did you guys get so hooked on pills?
Yeah,
he's so
developed
funny.
the pill problem. Yeah.
He's so funny. But where did this actually come from?
So the story of our design is actually pretty interesting. So we initially kind of sketched the boxes of the vehicle.
Right.
And we just kind of made it like, here's the box, and everything fits in. And then we tried to, like, ourselves sketch out some designs, and of course we're not designers and we don't really kind of can't really pick out what good design is. We hired a few designers that all had really great ideas, but we felt the vehicle felt too familiar in the form of like a UTV / golf cart like looking kind of approach, and we just wanted to deviate from that. Like we felt that if we're going to present a vehicle that's different from the ground up, it's got to have a design language associated with that vehicle, recognizable from the ground up. Forrest had worked with Yves Behar before on when he launched Mission Motors, the electric motorcycle company he launched back in the early 2000s. And we called him up and he picked up his phone and we told him what we were doing. He's like, oh man, I love that. I want to be a part of it. He created about 12 different sketches that we went through in different iterations. And at first, this was the most divisive by far.
Really? Okay.
Like we had standard designs, maybe we'll show them to you as well. We had standard designs of all different types of headlight situations and ways to incorporate the venting of the behind the rear wheel. And we kept going back to this and going, no, we're never going to go with that. No one's going to like that. It's hideous, it's ugly. And then we saw it more and more, we're like, oh my God, it's so distinctive and it so kind of tells the story of like approachable, but also intense, and like had all the adjectives that the designers were throwing out there. We're like, yeah, we really get it. Oh man. And now we go to like, I drive my truck and I see this in the rearview mirror and I see the 6 lights. I'm like, it's the Telo. I can see it.
Yeah, it's very unique and noticeable. You know, I was mentioning to you earlier, I was just in China checking out the Firefly, and like this feels like obviously totally different, but something about having 3 signature headlight designs on each side. And headlights are, you know, how you really tell the face of a car, especially at night where there is, you can't necessarily see the entire shape, but that is like how you have your exact styling. And is these actually the headlights?
So these are prototypes of the headlights.
Right.
So they do have like glass and refractions where they don't have, like in full transparency, we'll tell you what is not production in this vehicle.
Right.
A production set of headlights requires beam steering, or not necessarily beam steering, but you have to optically align your individual LEDs to make sure you get the right field of view and it meets a certain set of requirements.
Right.
We have not gone through the very, very meticulous process to ensure that that's possible. So this will not illuminate at a nighttime situation the full field of view required by law.
Yeah. So are you planning headlights in a different area?
No, it will work like this.
They will be in
but
here.
But these prototype versions don't serve the
This is more
right
proof of design concept in a way.
That's really cool. But yeah, you see the language kind of continue down here.
Yeah, this is funny too. Like the idea behind this actually was like a nice like example of like, oh, we got an engineering idea and it doesn't quite work out, but we like how it ended up in a design aspect.
Yeah.
The idea was it'd be like golf ball dimples.
Right.
To like break up the high pressure air zone so it could flow around the vehicle.
Okay.
But it turns out that the most of golf ball dimples, actually the more effect is on the sides of the golf ball, not the front of the golf ball.
Right.
It just, the fact that the golf ball spins on it, so you got to have it all over. So it turned out to not actually have any really positive or negative effect in aerodynamics, and we're like, well, we kind of like it.
Just kind of leave it. I mean, if you had these all on the side, would that help, or would that?
Nope, no, I don't think so. You want laminar airflow on the side.
Right.
So the idea about the golf ball dimples is you want to be able to, instead of having the really turbulent zones happen behind the curved surfaces, you want a nice break.
Yeah.
And so we already have a nice break inherently in the design of the side of the vehicle, so we didn't need dimpling on the side of the vehicle.
Right. And there's a couple kind of air things happening.
Yeah.
One here going into what looks like radiator.
That's right.
And that's part of the cooling. I want to talk about cooling as well. Because, you know, you had an early buck rolling around that was kind of just more like raw roll cage, like proof of like drivetrain and seating where the seats go and stuff. But that had like, you know, a really big radiator that was like, you know, it works. But like, what have you decided to do with cooling this giant battery, which we'll get to in a minute?
Yeah, so when you talk, everyone always asks the question, why do you have radiators in an electric vehicle? You don't have a gas engine. Well, actually, you need lots of radiators. You need lots of airflow in an electric vehicle. Maybe the heat load isn't as intense as a gas motor is, but a gas motor can operate at a significantly higher temperature differential than the components of an electric vehicle can operate at.
Right.
So, like, because your explosions are much more
intense.
They're much hotter than coolant that flows through a battery pack. So you still need cooling.
Yeah.
The decision we made from an architectural perspective was we wanted the front of the vehicle to have a separate cooling system than the rear of the vehicle.
Right.
And that way we didn't have to have coolant flowing between the front and the rear of the vehicle and could isolate the components to significantly smaller packaging. Because everything in this is a packaging study.
Yep.
So we had a front radiator that ties to a cooling system that goes to the front end motor, the front inverter, and the cabin system.
Okay.
We have a rear loop, actually 3 loops in the rear, that go to the rear motor inverter, the DC to DC, the charge system, and the front motor, the rear motor inverter, and then the battery pack.
So basically kind of 4 cooling systems, 4 radiators, or are they kind of all?
There's 3 total radiators,
Okay.
but the dual, there's dual radiators in the back, a single radiator in the front. The way that coolant loops tend to work is you have different interfaces between different fluids to make sure that you have the right temperatures at the right system at the right time.
Right. So would you have this big radiator on the front if you didn't have the front motor, like you opt for the rear wheel drive?
This front motor's heat load is actually about the same as the front, as the HVAC system for the vehicle itself.
Right.
So we still need a radiator in there. Sure, it could be skinnier in terms of like the actual depth of it, but there's no reason to design 2 different radiators, 2 different systems.
Right, yeah, if it just works. Because it'll probably be primarily rear wheel driven. Even if you had dual motor, the rear motor is probably doing a good chunk of the work.
Well, keep in mind that when you do regenerative braking, the front system does most of the regenerative braking, and there's a lot of heat load ensued in regenerative braking.
Okay, yeah, cool. And then 2 windshield wipers, kind of opposite approach.
Yeah.
And that I kind of want to talk about safety as well, because that's one of the most common questions I've gotten before I even gotten here, is people wondering, how is this? And it's probably the question you're bored of it by now.
Yeah, no, I love talking about it because it's kind of the special sauce. I do give a little bit, to be fair to your audience, I give a little bit of generic answers on purpose.
Yeah.
Because I felt that if we told you all the intricate details, then someone else could go and try to do what we do.
True.
But in general, the story we tell is, from a first principles physics approach, you need an unadulterated amount of crush zone in the front of your vehicle to get your change in acceleration down to a certain amount. That's within the safety zone for, like effectively for infants in the vehicle. And that number of inches that you need with unadulterated comfort zone is actually about 10.
Okay.
We have significantly more than that.
Yeah.
But this idea that you need a long hood to get to a safe vehicle is actually perpetuated by the fact that you have to package a large internal combustion engine in the front of most vehicles. And people say, oh, the engine submarines. Well, 2 things. One, there's a ton of inertia when that engine submarines, so it's not like, and that plays into the change in acceleration of the vehicle. And also, there's all the hard points in the front of that vehicle associated with the engine that don't compress.
Yeah.
And they don't submarine. So you've got a lot of times automakers will put just a little bit extra space in the front bumper and call it safe. And they'll say, okay, we did our job. We don't need to rebuild the entire vehicle. This vehicle's first principles approach has been, let's get a completely unadulterated front crumple zone, make sure that meets all the requirements of the front crash safety and offset crash safety, and then work our way backwards from that.
Right. And you went from, the motorcycle scooter talking, and then you guys, someone wanted a motorcycle, someone wanted a scooter, compromise into a truck.
Clearly.
Somehow makes sense. But you didn't compromise to 3 wheels. Which has a whole separate kind of safety, sometimes gray area it seems for some companies who do that. But homologating it entirely as a real car and actually a real truck.
Yeah.
And I don't know who knows this, but trucks used to be small, and then they kind of got bigger over time, especially in 2010?
Yep.
When truck regulations really changed and needed to have more of the safety stuff that other cars had, and that's what caused them to get bigger and bigger. So it's not necessarily that people want bigger. Some people do, but like a lot of people still look fondly back on the S10, the old Rangers, like the old small trucks. Yeah. And they got so big that Ford was like, oh shoot, we need another small one. So they brought the Maverick out. So it's kind of like, I do think there is an actual market that wants something utilitarian, but still city friendly, which hasn't traditionally existed.
Yeah, I think that there's this like, especially in the US, there's a big connotation around city vehicles need to be cheap, but also slow, loss-leading vehicles for the automaker, so they never make a profit. They need to be cramped, like lethargic, all the bad words. Like there's this like, for some reason we've landed at this idea that like, oh, those city folk, they don't like to drive fast, they don't like to carry anything, they don't actually stretch their legs. They're totally fine with this little, mobility scooter that's enclosed.
Right.
And we think that's just like, we found that that's not the case because we live in cities and we're like, I like to drive fast. I like to go to the mountains. I like to carry a lot of stuff. Like, I don't want to compromise on any of that.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't have to. And I'm willing actually even to pay a ton more if it means that I can have a vehicle that fits in my downtown city area.
Yeah, it's funny how some of the smallest vehicles are the most expensive, because that's when you start looking at supercars and whatever. But
the vehicle that just won, like they just set the record for the Goodwood Hill Climb, that like McMurtry Spearling.
Right.
That's 134 inches long. That's the size of that K car.
That is considerably shorter than this.
Yeah.
We keep calling this Telo, by the way, but the model name is MT1.
MT1.
Which I saw on your shirt, which is mini truck one. Is that
That's
kind
right.
of okay?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean,
Although we've been playing with some ideas around, maybe we shouldn't just only call it the mini truck. Maybe it should be like the mini super truck or the super mini truck, or
right.
Something that kind of connotates the fact that it's just not mini. It's a beast.
Right. It's a beast in other ways. Like you say, big truck energy.
Yeah.
Kind of looking at the wheels. I don't know what the easiest thing to look at for you, Robert. We'll go around this side again. What size wheels are these?
So these are
16s.
16s by 6.5.
Okay. And you'll have, at least I noticed on the website, a couple different wheel options that I saw. These are kind of the 4-spoke design.
Yeah, the 4-spoke and a 5-spoke, yeah.
Yep. And that makes sense, pretty normal. On the subject of airflow here, this is also very interesting.
Yeah.
From a design perspective, that also plays into the door handles, which also plays into the pill shape entirely.
Yep.
You even have the mirror pill shape. No, just kidding. Everyone does that.
Yeah.
Explain this.
Yeah,
Is there a name for that? Do you call it something?
It's funny. There's technical names for it, right?
Okay.
Like in F1, you can call them turning vanes or barge boards.
Right.
We're certainly not an F1 vehicle, so those terms don't apply. But
You've had this on track.
We have had this on track, yeah. A lot of companies include something akin to this, where it's a pressure relief zone for the front of the tires. What happens is, especially with our front tires that has a lot of airflow flowing through that open exposed area.
Yep.
If you didn't have a way to relieve that high pressure zone behind the vehicle, it would actually act like an air brake, and air would jettison out the side, and almost like in aerodynamics speak, it would almost act like there was a big giant thing sticking out right here.
Right.
And we didn't want that. We wanted to get as close to possible as getting air back to align with the side of the vehicle, so we had air come through that high pressure zone and reattach to the side of the vehicle.
And that's a unique issue caused by the tire being kind of the front thing. Like there's no.
It's especially prevalent on our vehicle.
Okay.
And you'll notice, like as you drive, if you do look around other vehicles, I don't see any in this parking lot. But as you see, like the Porsche Taycan or even the Honda Civic, I think it's actually blocked off from the Civic. They do have a pressure relief zone behind the front tire, but it's much smaller because they don't have the exposed nature of the front of their tires.
Right. And then with the exposed nature, you also have to worry about some of the suspension components behind the wheel.
Yeah.
Do you have any special aero stuff with that?
So yes, we do. You can kind of see the contours on the lower control arm. We will eventually get some aerodynamic capabilities on the other parts. There was some goofball yesterday made a joke about the front axles being aerodynamic.
Yeah. Can't wait to watch his video. But then you have the door handles, which are also pretty cool. And how do they function?
So eventually they will be mechanical.
Okay.
And there'll be some changes to the door handles too, because we take a teeny bit of an aerodynamic hit by these being pocketed in the way they are. So we will have some change where I believe in the future you'll be able to put your hand in like that, and there'll be a cover that dips down, and then you'll be able to reach and pull.
Oh, I see. Okay.
For this prototype, these are haptic because it's really easy to electrically control everything.
Yep.
And you can do it all by software, and you can tune everything.
Right.
But in the future, that'll all be mechanical as well.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. I guess we'll get inside in a minute. But looking back here, this is, kind of a familiar thing for many EV truck enthusiasts.
Should I make the joke?
Yeah. As if it hasn't been exhausted enough.
The joke your audience has probably heard a few times already?
Yeah. What's under the bed? Tell me.
Under the bed? I don't know. I'm a little scared of it.
Monster Tunnel. Which I believe, wasn't it Drew that came up with that?
Drew did come up with this, yes.
Okay, yeah. He's to blame for many dad jokes, I'm sure. But this is an additional form of lockable storage.
Correct.
On a truck, which is a welcome accessory.
Yeah, and I feel like, for me, I most of the time I carry a backpack or laptop bag around.
Yeah.
And just to have it go somewhere and not have to worry about it, it's just very, very cool.
Okay, Monster Tunnel, under the bed.
Very easy to open.
Very funny, very easy. Yeah, you can actually see all the way through. It extends, which is nice. Do you know the actual width, once the doors are closed?
Yeah, so when the doors are completely closed, it is 62 inches
Okay.
in its entirety.
Right, so 5 feet plus a bit. Which, you can fit plenty of things in there. And then I'm sure, you said there might be a bit of a change with
so one thing it's funny, you get a bunch of people that have worked on electric vehicles in the past, and there's certain things you don't realize that you don't know.
Yeah.
One of the biggest learnings for us was the way that A-side, B-side body panels come together, and the way you incorporate weatherproofing and weather sealing to it all ends up with a tolerance stack up and an area you have to accommodate all these things for, and a swing of the hinges and doors. And by the end of the day, when we had designed this, we hadn't taken any of that into consideration, and so we ended up with a step between where we wanted the base of the door to what it ended up being with the weatherproofing.
Right.
So in the future, what we really need to do is have this cut line follow the contour of the door all the way back so that this drops down and we don't have that step.
Right, so then it's even more usable
Exactly.
storage space, still impressively above the battery. That's pretty cool. Will this be like weight, like could you like step on it?
That's the idea. You can sit on it, step on it,
Okay.
jump
yeah.
on it. Not right now though.
Yeah, right, not this one. At some point, that'd be fun. And then yeah, coming around the back, I mean, it's clearly a decent sized bed.
Yeah.
It's 5 feet.
It is 62, from the base of the bed, back of
Right,
the bed to the base
slanted.
of here, it's 62 inches.
Okay. Wow. So yeah, bigger than a Rivian, which you know, not to play the comparison game, but that is a complaint with some Rivian owners, is like, I wish there was just a bit more bed. And so I guess with this, you're actually going for a very, very functional bed, and then maybe a little bit less cabin or no frunk. Like that's where you're kind of
Yeah.
picking and choosing your battles.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, to their credit, I think that they, for a long road trip, sitting in the back seats of a Rivian is going to be more comfortable.
Yeah.
And that's a trade-off that we give.
Yeah, right. But then what's unique about this is that you actually have, or will have, access to the tunnel.
Yep.
So that's a very interesting.
We do right now, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just that in the future, there'll be a little bit easier way. These are all quarter-turn screws.
Yep.
So you can definitely do it in a matter of a minute, but
Right,
I
right.
want it to be a pretty quick, easy thing to do.
Yeah, at some point, maybe a latch mechanism, still figuring that
Yeah.
out.
It needs to lock, because you can't,
right,
you
right.
can't have a lockable Midgate and have people be able to just reach in and pull it open.
Right. And then what else you could also add is, you know, like the bed cover.
A tonneau cover and a cap.
Yeah. And I'm guessing not a powered tonneau, it'd be more of a...
So we just have designed the threefold right now, but we would like to design a powered, and if you're, and this is a good one for your audience to say, how should we design a electrical tonneau cover? Because one of the problems I have is that once you roll it up, you have like a massive box effectively in the
has to
front
go
of your
somewhere,
bed.
yeah.
It has to go somewhere. We were thinking maybe we could tuck it into the sides and go right to left.
Oh,
I don't know.
that'd be
I've kinda-
interesting.
Or
Yeah.
maybe you could tuck into the tailgate, but then you still have a box.
Because
No.
there is like space here
There
that's not entirely empty, but you know, possibility of that. So yeah, I should have said this at the beginning though, by the way. Leave your comments below on questions, concerns, ideas.
What you want to see in the truck.
Yeah, this is the time to throw it out there before they've like started shipping them.
Yep.
So that makes sense. A lot of, you know, lockable, or not lockable, but what do you
L-tracks.
call those? L-tracks? Okay. I'm clearly a big truck guy.
This actually comes from the Sprinter van world.
Okay.
Not a lot of trucks use them, but a lot of people that do camping on Sprinter brands, they love them because you can have different accessories
Right.
in the sides of the vehicle.
Right. And then power here, which is awesome. NEMA 1450
Yep.
would be the best thing ever, because
Yeah.
we're somewhat annoyed that it seems like only the Cybertruck's really gone that route.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of it comes down to the supply chain for the combined charge unit hasn't enabled people to do that. But it's funny, I was actually watching your video on the AC Propulsion Scion box that had 20 kilowatts of bi-directional capability. So it's definitely been possible for the
Yeah.
last 20 years.
I think that'd be awesome, especially for us when we were range testing all these cars. We run them out to dead. We had to charge them off something, which Lucid was great with their bi-directional range exchange, and then Cybertruck worked great. But those are really the only two that are like really solid. So it's cool to see various implementations. Lucid's, of course, was through the actual charge port, whereas the Cybertruck just has
I think that once those become more ubiquitous, we'll probably move to a through the charge port
Right.
solution as well. But there's no reason that you can't hook up. If you want to hook up a welder, you can't do it through the charge port right now.
Yeah, right. But yeah, it's very useful, and you know, having the wheels out so far is what makes this so small,
Yes.
and what makes this so wide.
There's two things that make that so small. Like the wheels out wide, certainly. But the other thing is the entirety of the suspension top hat
Yep.
resides underneath the underneath the bed itself.
Right.
So that way we can effectively just push the wheel wells out so they're just encapsulating the tires.
Yep.
And that gives us that full 49 inches of width between the wheel wells.
Crazy. So actually like 4 feet and even a bit of change. And you know, there are trucks with wide enough beds for plywood, but sometimes it's above the wheel wells.
Yeah.
In this case, you're actually working with below
within the wheel well.
Within the wheel well.
It's a huge complaint I have in my truck is that you just can't fit a 48 inch, like anything that's 48 inch across.
Right, which is more than just plywood. So yeah, usable tailgate, which actually was kind of a cool spot where the button's kind of hidden. I think people don't really expect that. And even cool to see the badge kind of over offset. I think it's interesting not being in the very middle. For some reason, I really like that. What I think would be funny is if you did put a number on, you know how GM puts the number on the back, but it's like Newton meters, which no one even knows what that means in the US. So I was thinking you could do like inch pounds of torque or just some crazy,
just ridiculous numbers.
0 to 60. You can do something crazy like that. While we're back here, we should also look at, I think, the charge port, because that's something that was early news as well, is that a lot of people were like, oh, NACS.
Yeah, but I think that's now it's table.
Now it's like, you have to.
I'll caveat this with, in the future, this will be a nice, you hit the button and it will like that. Yeah. It won't be powered necessarily, it'll just be a mechanical linkage.
Okay, yeah.
Right now it's just magnets.
Yeah.
And my fingers are not small enough to do this without putting the tailgate down first. So.
I do have the potential hot take that I prefer non-powered charge ports. For various reasons. But
yeah, you don't want to get locked out when you charge your car.
Right. Yeah, but this is cool to see back here. I know some people have already asked, like, will this handle, adapters to fit in the CCS?
That's how we charge it right now.
It could be sometimes a challenge with the spacing, but...
Yeah, so our adapters that we have fit perfect for that.
Yeah.
In fact, the thing that we have is the biggest problem is the NACS port. NACS charger has this like nice radius to it that like gets pretty close to this. So.
So have you tried it with a DC adapter?
Yeah, we have.
Oh, yeah.
We have a long enough one that sticks itself all the way out.
Right, you need some long ones for the Cybertruck too. It's just, adapter life. We're in that like MacBook era 2016 when everything was like switching over.
I think just raising this up just like a few millimeters would have just given you enough clearance for everything you need.
Right, yeah. So it's cool to see like final little, well, not final, there's still a lot of finalization happening, but tweaks from iteration to iteration, and we can't show it, but there's also another one kind of being built now that will be also really cool.
That one.
Yeah, look at that. Amazing. Tarp is extra. So yeah, but it's cool to see the iterations, and I actually like covering vehicles this early on because I like to see the iteration over time, and we don't always see that story. When we see like a final production car from some other company at the official press launch, we don't always know what early decisions there were, and I think that's kind of a fascinating process.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that prefer to go heads down on their vehicle design process, and because they serialize it so much that it kind of all just comes together at the end.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't be able to show you this because this wouldn't drive. This would be a rolling version of the vehicle because they wouldn't be building the powertrain simultaneously to building the body. But we felt that like the world was kind of different in hardware design in general, where software's gotten so freaking incredible that we can do hundreds of aerodynamic tests overnight. We can do crash safety testing all virtually and crash this vehicle hundreds of times already. Like these things are possible now with how good software's gotten, and it lets us build a vehicle this fast.
Right, it's gotten a lot easier to be kind of an EV startup. Doing an EV startup 20 years ago was a huge feat. It's still a huge feat, but now it's a huge feat with modern tech that helps the design, the CAD processes, simulations, all those things that are...
It's a huge feat, that's why we have such a small footprint.
I love it.
You like that, come on.
Really need a mic for Robert too. So being a truck, also towing.
Yeah.
Now I know there's people that are very opinionated about towing with electric trucks.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who say, Robert behind the camera, who will say like, maybe not you, but a lot of people are like, I won't tow with an electric truck until I can tow a trailer 500 miles. That's crazy. But there's a lot of people that do local towing, which I think is interesting and a very common use case. Going to the boat, take the boat to the lake, horses from one barn to another. Our colleague Scott will do that at times. Or even just towing cars to a local track.
Yep.
That's my personal interesting use case. Can I put a trailer on this and put my Miata on the trailer, take it somewhere?
Yes, definitely put your Miata on the trailer and go. Just keep in mind that, the electric vehicle is by inherently so thermally efficient that any hit to efficiency dramatically affects the range.
Right.
So the two things that prevent you from driving long range are rolling resistance and aerodynamic drag. And a really efficient vehicle that has small rolling resistance and small aerodynamic drag cuts to the air very fast and without a lot of energy.
Right.
Throw a giant trailer on the back, and although it has the power and capability to tow that trailer, you greatly increase the aerodynamic drag, you greatly increase the rolling resistance, and dramatically reduces the range you can tow at.
Right.
So a horse trailer, for example, one of the worst offenders probably, you would have less than half the range of the vehicle if you were towing 6,000 pounds.
Yep. But if I have a flatbed trailer with my efficient Miata, it's not as big of a hit. But this thing can tow 6,600 pounds,
That's
which is respectable. And tow hitch down here if you want to see it, just behind a cover at the moment. But yeah, you guys have shown some videos, towing it, and
Yeah.
it's totally doable. So
And the cool thing about towing with an electric vehicle is because you have instantaneous torque on hand, you actually feel more planted while you're towing with it.
Right.
You just grab a greatly reduced range.
Right, yeah. That's the big drawback, and that is, a potential. It's interesting to see how people approach the charge port with trailers. You have the charge port, which is the best location for backing into a V3 supercharger, which are one of the most common places. But then with towing, that can sometimes be a challenge. But granted,
There's really not a elegant towing solution to charging yet.
Yeah.
And I think the most elegant one is drive-through.
Yeah.
And if it's drive-through, having it on the driver's side is probably the best place for it to go.
That makes it easy, because there are the trucks with the charge port in the front, and then you can nose in, but then it's
You still have to back your ass out.
you're blocking stuff, and also backing it all up. You're right. That's not really the most elegant solution.
I think there's a future that will exist that you're going to just drive your vehicle through, just like gas stations are.
Yep.
And I think that's going to be this solution on the back corner on the driver's side is going to work best for that.
Yeah, we're getting there. But let's look at the interior too, because that's what I'm really also excited about. Because it's hard to make it's hard to make interiors stand out these days, because I feel like so many ideas have been done.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of interesting to see. Robert wants to go on the other side. I don't know the best way to show this, but
It definitely, looking in this way is definitely the best way to show it.
very, very, very cool. And actually a lot of cloth, which I like. I think we're in this notion lately of to be premium, it has to be leather.
Yeah.
But everything's kind of moving away from leather. Not entirely, you still have leatherette. But I think cloth is feeling more and more premium by people.
They want leather.
We've heard a lot of people say it. We've heard a lot of feedback on the cloth piece, but one of the cool things about the cloth is it actually has some texture to it that is kind of compressible.
Yeah.
And so it's got a kind of a not just a premium feel to it, but also almost kind of feels like you get this little feeling of more comfort in some ways.
Yeah.
The really interesting thing about what we did here is the pedestal, which I'm sure you've heard about as from a few other people before.
Yeah.
But the seats literally sit on almost floating in the air. All the electronic components that slide the seat forward and back and lean it back and forth sit inside the seat itself.
Okay.
So by doing that, we could put a structure that actually just sticks the seat right up in the air.
Yeah.
And what that does is gives you full foot sweep around the seat itself.
Right.
And that's really important. The obvious one is important for the rear passengers so they can get their feet all the way forward as possible.
Yep.
To give them the most leg room as possible. But maybe the less obvious one is our wheel wells are a big part of the structure of the vehicle and thus part of the ingress and egress, because it's how you kind of get the packaging we got.
Yeah.
And if we had a square seat that kind of went down to the floor vertically from the cushion, you wouldn't be able to put your foot in there.
Right.
And it would greatly impede your ingress and egress in the vehicle.
Right. So if you go ultra wide view, I'll actually get in here and you can see
You
me.
put the seat in you just slide it back a bit because that's in my position.
Okay. You'll see me ingressing.
Bless you.
But yeah, that makes all the difference, because if it was seat rails up to here, I would have nowhere for my foot. So that's actually not really a big deal. It is definitely, it's different than your traditional car, I guess you should say.
It's definitely different. It's a new motion you have to go through, but we wanted to make sure that even though it's new and you notice it, it doesn't impede your experience.
Right. And seating position, I mean, obviously nothing's really final in here, but I actually really like the seats aren't, the most comfortable in this early buck, but I have the steering wheel feel and look I'm obsessed with.
It's going to be slightly larger and we'll have a slightly rounded top.
Okay.
That's the feedback we've gotten from a lot of people that have driven it.
Is it because of blocking the gauges?
So the blocking the gauges thing is another thing that was a good example of engineers and designers not speaking the same language all the time.
Yeah.
So that'll be improved as well.
Okay.
The steering wheel has the ability to go up, but it actually hits the gauge if it does. So that's an improvement that will occur.
Right, yeah. So still, still things to figure out with that.
Absolutely.
But then you're still planning on, having steering wheel controls.
Yep.
And then, I know this is like a prototype, so maybe drive, reverse, all that is different. But what is the plan for getting into drive and reverse?
On the buttons on the this guy.
Okay. So back, right here. Cool.
And then there will be, like, we've heard a lot of people say they want buttons, so there'll be a bunch of buttons that are not shown in this. This will be a actual fully mechanical piece, but it will interact with the touchscreen itself.
Okay.
And then underneath here, we'll set a ton of buttons across the bottom.
Yeah. That's great to hear because, a lot of people complain about having to do everything through a screen. You can make the screen amazing. People will still complain about it.
Yeah.
I do think, some like Tesla or Rivian have like really responsive screens. It's not as much of a barrier to entry, but having driven some recent vehicles with physical buttons, I get it. Anything else to note about materials? Because I see some that are not really that common.
Yeah.
Is this?
So recycled cork.
Yeah. Is that hoping to make production?
We hope to, but there's probably some things that we need to really consider on what's the high wear areas. So, like, I've already kind of scratched up some of the cork as well. Even like, we need to figure out a much better way to keep this from deforming over time. We like anodized aluminum, but depending on the tariff situation, we may not be able to get a lot more aluminum from Canada. So, like, there's certain things we really need to kind of think about on this. But the doors, like, because of the way you sit more inwards to avoid the sweep of the tires, you actually end up with these massive storage compartments in the doors.
Yeah.
And that gives us opportunity for really big speakers,
Yeah.
really big door storage. Kind of a fun little, like, usually it's like, how do you cram things in the door? Now it's like, we got all this room. Let's do some fun stuff with the door.
Right. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see in final production state, and also, I'm curious what will go with software, sound system, stuff that isn't ready to test yet. But that's what I'm really keen about as a tech nerd, as an audiophile. Yeah. I'm like, that's one of the first things I look at when I drive an actual production car. So unfortunately,
but certainly the NVH on this vehicle is not production worthy yet, and we are still chasing down. Like, we actually switched over from our KO2 off-road tires to just like the cheap track tires we did for their track day, and the noise is like cut in half. And we're like, well, that's interesting.
Yeah, tires make a huge difference. But I mean, looking at the interior design, like just the flow of what's currently the kind of cork material all the way up there, like I really like the curvature of everything, and also the patterns in the fabrics, the patterns even in this like piece right here. Again, this is all early prototype stuff, but you can still see the direction, the intention of where you're going. Yeah. And I'm a fan of that. And to bring it up again, I loved the Firefly I just saw in China, and this feels reminiscent. Obviously different, your own taste and flavor, but that Firefly turned me on to the idea of like, wait, cloth seats can actually feel and look pretty nice. Cloth interior, that car is definitely very, very, very cheap. And so you kind of would see and feel that some places, but it didn't feel like overtly, offensively saving costs somewhere else. Let's check the back out. I'm kind of curious how I'll fit, because I mean, I guess I should actually set my position as far as the seat forward.
Yeah, make sure you lean it you can lean it with the front of the...
Okay, got it. Yeah, so I guess I would be probably right about here. Okay, and
so, you're 6 foot?
Yeah, I'm about 6 foot. And of course it does depend on torso versus leg difference. But jumping in here, so sitting behind myself, obviously not going to be amazing knee room, but like my feet make all the difference, because otherwise you could be like this in most other cars. If you see, my feet are like wedged back behind where a seat would actually be, but having the pedestal I think is a pretty unique solution. So I'm actually not like uncomfortable at all right now. And headroom is something else I was coming into this concerned about, and now I'm really not. Glass roof, standard, is that kind of the plan?
Yeah, so we've actually learned ourselves that glass roofs in hot temperatures can be quite a challenge. So we're definitely going to implement a monochromatic dimmable roof solution, and even in these vehicles that we're prototyping, we're going to get another layer of sunlight proof on them too, because it gets hot up there, and good thing you're wearing a hat. Yeah. But we'll also have an option for a solar roof, and then we likely will do a solid metal roof as well, given just all the feedback we've gotten. Yeah. And it's not a hard part to stamp out, because the more, like, what's expensive when you stamp metal parts is the depth of the tool, and there's not much curvature on the roof, so it's a pretty cheap tool to make.
Makes sense. And yeah, I mean, it's a delicate balance with seats themselves. I mean, there's a whole lot that goes into designing seats. I learned a lot just visiting like Magna and like, seeing how that stuff's done. Because you're balancing driver comfort, but also the passenger behind you if it is like a dual row situation. But it looks like you're planning on having a screen back here, some USB ports.
Cup holder?
Yeah, cup holder.
Just one though. We couldn't fit two across.
But that's partially because you're like actually fitting 5 people in this.
Yeah.
So that's a unique factor as well that seeing this truck originally, I was like, oh, cool. Big bed, 4 seats, impressive. But like having 5 seats, now sure, maybe not.
I mean,
5.
it's a Type 5.
Yeah. Maybe
we can do it.
Big. It's a good thing you're the only one that hits the gym because I'd push you away. But yeah, I mean, totally usable space. And then, I guess we should show off the
Midgate?
The Midgate.
Sure.
That's one of the fun factors.
Maybe get out first.
Yeah, maybe I'll get out first.
You got to take the headrest off first. There's a lot of things that we've learned about this Midgate that need to get improved.
So there we go. Midgate. At the moment, you have to take off the headrests, kind of move the seatbelt out of the way. It's a prototype Midgate,
Yes.
proof of concept, figuring out how that works. It's good to learn how it works, but now we have kind of both ends folded down, which, do you know the measurement all the way back to the tailgate?
Yeah,
down?
so I think the tailgate's 21 inches long, if I remember correctly. Okay, we can measure it.
The Midgate, I mean, that's like 96.
So in order to get full 96, full transparency, the seats have to be pretty dang far forward.
Okay.
To the point where it's cramped to drive it as far
right.
possible, but cramped.
Right.
But with the tailgate down, you get an additional 21 inches as well. We'll likely have an accessory that could stick up out of the tailgate. 21, right?
Yeah.
21 and a half. Okay,
Nice.
There you go. But then 62 as well. So that's how it all adds up.
Yeah, so a bunch of various configuration options, which I think people do like choice, which is great. And you were talking, so headrest, first of all, I mean, those, I don't know if you've thought about how to manipulate that.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that people do already. They have them pocket into the seat, and they have like a little L to them, and they fold flat that way.
Yeah.
That's an easy implementation.
Yeah.
Having them fold and tuck is also an easy implementation. Just not something we did for this set of vehicles.
Right.
And the real thing is, though, should we do a 60-40 vehicle? Midgate.
Right. Should it be all one like it is now, or 60-40, or probably not half and half? That would.
I don't think half and half makes sense. I think it's 60-40 or all.
Yeah.
And I think that 60-40 makes a lot of sense. It's just a set of ceiling challenges that we have to make sure we accommodate for.
Right. With every single change and iteration, you have to think about the safety aspects and adjusting everything else around it. But 60-40 would be really cool because then you could have 3 friends and like surfboards and whatever else.
Yeah.
Being out in California, at least that's what I've seen so much surfing here.
Exactly.
That kind of makes sense. But before we take it on a drive, you mentioned the roof being solar as a possible option. Same with the
tonneau
cover, but also even if you went to the what do you call that? Box, camper shell thing. So having some solar, which some people are like, oh, Aptera does that, and that's actually who you're talking to, right?
Yeah. So they have a great integration for how solar fits on glass panels and implements into the actual charge converter to actually power the battery pack. And we don't want to invent that ourselves, so they have a great implementation for it.
Right. So I feel like that's kind of something I wanted to touch on too, is like developing kind of the battery pack and figuring that out in-house, which we'll talk about in a second, but also figuring out which components are sort of off the shelf. Now, a lot of people are telling that off the shelf story, like, a bunch of stuff Telo is doing is off the shelf, right to repair. Those are really good words, but not as like easy as it sounds.
Yeah.
Not off the shelf meaning I can go to Lowe's and pick up your inverter, but it's more like a component actually existing already that even other companies may use or may use a version of it. So it's just a pre-developed component that you don't have to go through the R&D and even the
safety
assembly.
certification.
Certifications that have already been done. That saves costs on your end, which then makes this feasible.
And there's a lot of components that exist right now that do a great job at doing what we're trying to do as a vehicle, that we don't need to like try to race to go be 1% better.
Right.
We're not trying to go 0 to 60 in 1.7 seconds.
Right.
4 seconds is plenty fast for this vehicle, as you will experience.
Exactly. Let's fold it all back up real quick, and then we'll talk.
You want to help? right, we're gonna get this first try. Ready? Just gonna slowly go up and just go right in. Ready, go.
Okay, before we get any further, well, now I can see what it looks like with a lift. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I feel like the super common question with something like this is price. Now, we talked a bit about the K-Truck earlier.
Yeah.
And how one of its benefits was being extremely cheap and just trying to fit in as many places as possible. Pricing on this, because it is not quite as small or as simplistic as some other vehicles, it really is pitched as a full-fledged vehicle you can live with, even as a one-car solution.
That's right.
So, talk me through pricing.
Yeah.
And how you feel on that.
Yeah, your audience is going, yeah, why isn't it cheaper? I'd buy this if it were $10,000.
I would too.
Yeah, me too. I would love to buy it if it were $10,000. You know, what we try to do is build a pickup truck dedicated for downtown cities that could be a primary vehicle for the people that purchased it. And all of the people we spoke to had a set of requirements for their vehicles. They said it needs to be long range, 300 miles minimum. If it's a truck, it's got to have four-wheel drive. If it's a truck, it's got to be able to tow, carry a lot of payload, and I'm only buying a crew cab truck. I'm not buying a two-door. You know, the vast majority of people we said had those set of requirements. Those requirements mean that we had to implement a lot of things into this vehicle to make it fit those requirements. That means a big battery pack. That means two motors, two powerful motors. It means a frame structure that was able to support not only the payload, but also the towing. It means two sets of seats and all the stuff that accompany those seats. And when you get down to it, what other vehicle are we comparing to? Well, vehicles with 500 horsepower, with 300 miles of range, with 4 seats. None of them fit in the footprint we fit into. And that's part of the big selling point here. So no, we're not the cheapest vehicle in the market. We're certainly not an expensive vehicle by any means. There's plenty of trucks that do what we do that are twice the price.
Yeah.
But we heard from our customers what they wanted to see in their primary vehicle, and we had to implement that, and that's what it costs to implement that. Now, the big thing about what we're doing here is if size matters to you, if the space your vehicle takes up is something you think about all the time and it's an area of stress for you, this is the vehicle for you.
Yep.
But if it's not, this just might not be the vehicle for you.
Right.
And because we didn't want to compromise anything to get you that vehicle.
Right. Yeah, some people I think view this, and they might even be brought to Telo as like, well, this could be a really interesting second car. A lot of households do have a second car. Some even had third. We can go on and on. But I'd be really curious to see people approaching this as like, oh, interesting second car, and then realize, wait, maybe this could replace my car, or even consolidate two different, you know, some people may have an F-150 and then a Mini Cooper. And they're like, wait, I can do both?
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting, almost new vehicle variant. I mean, they kind of talk about it like a cover song has to be different or better. And I feel like in this way you can kind of be different, and depending on the use case, sometimes better too.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at, you know, this land full of SUVs, like we talked about, it is kind of cool to see something totally different than the current landscape of SUVs.
All silhouettes of vehicles look the same these days. But I think that really for you, for your audience, if you're in a place where parking is a premium and it's really hard to find parking, it stresses you out and it drives you crazy every day trying to do that, like it does for me, like I would be willing to pay a hell of a lot of money to solve that problem. And I do pay a hell of a lot of money in my underground parking garage I go to solve that problem.
Right. Yeah. And there's actual issues with some trucks not even fitting in parking garages in certain places. And yeah, the stress factor is one, but there's even like the actuality of like, this might not literally work. And I'm curious, maybe this is too early to discuss, but I mean, would you think about dealership model versus showroom model, direct to consumer type of thing, but also global markets? Because the issue with a lot of American cars is they're too big for global markets.
Yeah.
This doesn't have that issue.
And to the second one first. So we absolutely want to look at the global markets.
Yeah.
For sure. And whether it's this vehicle or a variant of this vehicle that fits for a global market, absolutely. On the mechanism for delivering it to customers, the truth is the landscape is changing a little bit right now. There's some legislation happening right now and a lot of court cases happening. We're a little bit of a wait and see situation where we want to see how all that shakes out. We would like to get customers to have both the number one is like they have a vehicle that they know how to service, that can do maintenance on, that they just have the ability to feel comfortable with that vehicle.
Yep.
And there are certain ways that can be done in both the direct-to-consumer mechanism and in the dealership mechanism.
Right.
I know that's a non-answer to you.
No.
But I do recognize that both of them are on the table right now, and we want to do what's best for our customers.
Right, makes sense. So yes, actual prices for the various trims, if you have it memorized.
I do. So the starting point of the vehicle, no government incentives.
Right, you don't know what's going to happen.
Actually, just last night, that was just voted off. So $41,520, because I had to have the 152 in there somewhere.
Right.
That is the price point for the standard range battery pack and the rear wheel drive version of the vehicle.
Yep.
And then it goes up to $50,000 for the long range and the dual motor version of the vehicle. And then you could add accessories and things, and it can be whatever you want it to be, of course.
Right.
And one thing that's important is, yes, there is a EV incentive currently in 2025 that may work for 2026 as well, but looks like it may go away pretty shortly thereafter. But if you're using this for commercial purposes, you should talk to your tax professional, because there's a lot of ways in which we specifically chose the gross vehicle weight rating of 6,000 pounds to allow you to have a class 2 vehicle, and if you're using it for work, there are tax incentives for you to use a vehicle of this size.
Right, and I could see a lot of potential for this being a work truck. I mean, are you thinking of work truck variants? I mean, are you looking at fleet?
The reason it's on a trailer right now is because it's going to a conference right now that builds the skyscrapers in downtown San Francisco.
Very cool. Okay, so that's actually a great skyscraper work truck, because those are in cities.
Exactly, that's right.
Nice. So yeah, I could see fleet customers and, I mean, all sorts of various use cases that have had traditional vehicles which work for them, but this could be kind of a whole new era of that.
Exactly.
So I'm waiting with bated breath to see how that goes.
Awesome.
All right, actually driving a Telo, but actually getting out on a real road with, I mean, it is like real vehicle, so we really maybe should have led with specs, but I was just so obsessed with getting right into the design and everything, because that's what really jumps out at you. Mm-hmm. But the specs also kind of jumped out at me, checking out the website and seeing other content. And you can direct me on a drive if you have any ideas, but yeah, so dual motor or single motor.
Yep.
And we're talking 500 horsepower. That's the big number everyone's
dual
talking
motor,
about. Yeah, so that's dual motor, 375-ish kilowatts.
Yep.
But then single motor, still a respectable, like 300 horsepower?
Yep. Get the reception. Blink reach.
Oh, right.
Yeah, still 300 horsepower.
So that's 225 kilowatts and plenty. This truck is not that heavy. We're in an age where you have electric trucks weighing anywhere from 6,600 to well over 9,000 pounds.
I was going to say, there's two trucks in particular that are that heavy.
Right, yeah. So this is 4,400 is kind of the plan.
The truck you're driving right now is 4,135. It'll get a little heavier.
Wow. Right, yeah. Once you add some things in here. But so two of these, and you're still looking at less than some other trucks out there. So it still is, pretty, actually zippable.
Yeah.
We'll see if we can get a bit of a straight line up here and kind of hit. Wow, that's awesome. And actually, maybe hot take, love the motor whine. I feel like some brands try to dial it back or dial it out. Some brands go with the fake engine noise or fake whatever you call it. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I think I don't have a super strong opinion about that. I think that we don't want to do something that requires a lot of extra engineering for no real purpose.
Yeah.
So you just get by default this motor noise.
Right.
Watch that merge coming up, so you got to punch.
I should have punched it.
Yeah. You can take a not here. We'll go over further.
Yeah.
Take a right.
But yeah, I guess power numbers. Are you advertising torque or have any?
We're not, but it's so torque with electric vehicles, I feel like it's a silly number.
Right. Because
torque is often spoken about in terms of wheel torque. So 1,500 foot-pounds of torque at each wheel.
Right.
Is 6,000 foot-pounds of torque overall. In reality, there's a gearbox that reduces down to 6 or 8 or 12 to 1. So you take it right here at this light. That is more comparable to what you would see in a gas vehicle, but still those numbers are just ridiculous.
Right. Yeah, it's not entirely realistic, and it is annoying that it feels like there's not really a standard on what people are choosing to disclose. and you have some other companies opting for wheel torque versus like, I guess, more traditional torque numbers.
Yep.
But that aside, torque's not the big deal. A lot of people.
I think it's at this light. I'm actually not sure. I know. Oh, hi. Yeah, thanks.
You must get a lot of people like stopping you.
Oh yeah.
If you're ever taking this thing out, this must like cause everyone to stop what they're doing and freak out a little bit. A lot of people are focused on 0 to 60 numbers, which this is 4 seconds dual motor.
Yeah.
Maybe 5 seconds single motor.
Yeah, probably. We haven't
tested?
really tested the single motor version.
Yeah, but that's
You're going to want to be in the right lane here.
okay.
So
5 seconds would be plenty for pretty much anyone. Where should I go here?
Yep. So you're going to take a right at El Camino. Yep. Meters don't work perfectly where they are.
I see how this could be fun on a track.
Yeah.
I
Forget to
really
reset your blinker.
Right. I really like the feeling of this. I mean, no, steering, pedal, like I'm not really focusing on pedal response, braking, all that stuff. I mean, does this have like, basic things like ABS planned? And
Yeah, it's already got traction control implemented,
Yep.
which you can turn off,
Okay.
which is part of one of the fun drift modes we have
Right.
for our internal team. I'm not saying that's going to make it to production.
Yeah. Well, if something like that makes the production-ish, I don't know. I think there'd be a lot of happy journalists. Maybe just make it like hard to get to so the general public's not too affected by that.
Your audience would love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
To talk about it.
I won't buy one unless you can turn off traction control or have a way to do that. But beyond like the motor specs, I also was curious about battery. 106 kilowatt hours is kind of the stated amount, and that's roughly gross. I mean, you'd have some sort of buffer.
That's right. I mean,
that.
that's like if you take the nominal voltage of each cell multiplied times the number of serial cells, and then you take the nominal current capacity and multiply it times the number of parallel cells, you get that number.
Right. And speaking of cells, I mean, looking at 2170s, and that's one of the things you're actually developing in-house. Is that's not the off-the-shelf component.
So we get the cells off the shelf.
The cells, but the battery pack
The battery pack itself is what we build from we source all of the components that help us build the battery pack. The special sauce is how we package that all into such a small form factor.
Right.
You can take a ride to the slide.
It's impressive, the form factor itself. I mean, being, like you said, 4 inches thick, and then fitting that between, that is where the longer wheelbase does help.
Yes.
If you had, front, I guess, axle right below us, like some of the K trucks, that would really impede on battery pack space.
We do a few things. We do that, and it would raise you up significantly higher, increasing your frontal area.
Right.
And having another detrimental hit. You're getting in the left lane here, so swing yourself wide.
Yep. And we can try a little bit of the turning circle, which isn't quite fully done in this truck, but the planned turning circle is an impressive, 40 feet curb
The
to curb?
38.5, this is 38.5.
Oh, this is, wow.
Yeah. The old previous version, the roll cage version, is not nearly as
Oh, got it, yeah. So, it'll be pretty tight curb to curb, which kind of makes sense for a small vehicle. I feel like that should be the most surprising thing. But yeah, 106 kilowatt hour battery pack is probably the main one. I mean, I think a lot of people are still in this range anxiety world. So they want as much range as possible. But for those who are maybe not worried about crazy long trips or anything, you're gonna offer a smaller battery pack as well.
Yeah, you take a little bit different chemistry, and you get a little bit of a shorter battery pack, but it would be a little cheaper too.
Yeah. And is that NMC chemistry?
So big battery pack is
big battery,
NMC, yeah.
But not entirely sure on the small one yet.
It really depends on the tariff situation.
Right.
The lithium iron cells, there's really only one country that sources those right now.
Yep.
And so that may change the strategy we have here.
Yeah.
Battery, by the way. This production truck didn't have, actual production battery, but Telo is making battery packs in-house. Not the cells. The cells will be manufactured. They've mentioned Samsung in other interviews, although I don't know if that's actually final because I think they're still possibly sourcing cells. Even tariffs can play with all this stuff. So what we do know is the big battery pack should be 2170 cells. That's what's making it, 4 inches thick and, fitting 106 kilowatt hours in that relatively impressively small compartment. That would be the battery area. But the small battery, we have no idea. I've heard on other interviews, maybe 77-ish kilowatt hours. That's probably still TBD. I don't know. They haven't really finalized any thoughts on small battery. I think LFP would be intriguing because that would give you roughly similar day-to-day driving range because, an NMC battery, like the big battery, charged to 80% may be close to the number of the small battery charged to 100%, but if it's LFP, then you can access that 100% more often as a daily driving number. But then on road trips and, moments where you need the full pack, you can charge the NMC pack to that level. It is also 400 volt architecture, which we didn't really get to talk about in this video, but that's at least what the initial truck is. Maybe in the future they'll go higher voltage, but 400 volt is what is easily accessible with, the off-the-shelf parts that we talked about earlier. There's just more components and probably cheaper components existing in that 400 volt architecture. What they claim on the website is 20 minutes to go from 20 to 80%. Now, the industry really seems to be leaning towards 10 to 80%, so I'm hoping that 20 minutes wouldn't creep up too much to do 10 to 80. Because if you get too much past that, you're starting to get into no more competitive territory. Although that's with the asterisk of this truck, not really having super direct competitors being how niche of a product it is. But maybe it'll scope other vehicle owners who are maybe they had a CUV and they realized they'd rather have more of a truck shape, a truck bed, but still have CUV-like efficiency. This could see as close to 3 point something miles per kilowatt hour, maybe low threes, but still should reach over 3 miles per kilowatt hour to get that 350 mile claimed range. And so that does actually sit in the realm of a lot of CUVs, crossover SUVs with the same efficiency, but then you're in the truck shape. So I do think that's intriguing. Peak charging rate, about 250 kilowatts claimed. We don't know what the charging curve looks like yet, although, a 3C charging potential is what they really are proud of. And, seeing 20 minutes, 20 to 80, that's decent. Honestly, totally fine. But it would be interesting to see what that curve actually looks like. How long will it actually hold? And especially, finding high enough amperage chargers to take advantage of the 250 kilowatt peak with relatively lower voltage. That means finding high amperage chargers, which aren't exactly the most common. We've seen the same issue with the likes of, Volvo EX90, which claims 250 kilowatts, but that also needed like 600 amps to charge that high. So we'll see. This may not actually peak at 250 in that many places, but it also might hold, above 200 fairly well. We've seen the charging curves with Rivian. We're not super impressed with the charging curves of Rivian or Tesla. Lucid is pretty good. So it would be interesting to see, those are the big three companies that we talked about in the video, but the smaller three, the little three, Aptera, Telo, and now Slate, how will those charging curves be? It's still early game on these cars, but I'm waiting with bated breath.
And now we're back at home.
Back at home base.
Why'd you give it one punch?
All right.
Wait till this car comes, maybe. Up there, good to go.
All right. Let's actually launch this thing. It actually rose the tires. I don't know why you wouldn't do that all day. I guess you care about the rubber a little bit. But
not these tires.
These
smell
tires,
them. Oh my god.
These tires have actually been ripped around Sonoma.
So you actually pull up a little further. There's a little bit turn around.
Okay.
I can smell those tires.
Yeah, I can smell rubber now. Yeah, it looks like you guys have been doing a lot of content as well, just showing incremental updates on the truck, taking it on track, actual consumer-based testing.
Yeah, things that consumers do every day, like take it to the track.
I think it would be the funniest thing to actually tow my Miata to a track and then actually drive the tow vehicle on track first and then take the Miata on track. Okay, so I had very, very, very limited time. In fact, they're now loading the Telo up to go to another event. This thing is in high demand apparently, but I just wanted to squeeze in a quick, I say quick, it's over an hour video probably, but I just wanted to squeeze in a video with the Telo, at least in its current state, to bring it to you guys. I'm really curious what you all think. There's a lot of talk about obviously the big three, meaning Rivian, Lucid, Tesla, but also the little three, I guess you could say. Telo, Aptera, and now Slate. Many companies have come and gone, but I'm curious, cautiously optimistic perhaps, but actually pretty optimistic on that side. I don't have as much caution as I thought I did, because I really do think they will come to production. Now, the big question is the ramping part. You know, it was, of course, possible for Tesla to bring the Roadster to early existence. They, of course, had Lotus build that for them, which, you know, Tesla's doing a similar thing where they're having another company. I believe Aria is the company building the first, you know, few hundred, but they can only support up to a couple hundred a year, which means they would then find another contract manufacturer to build, you know, low to medium volume, perhaps, like up to 5,000 a year. We'll just have to see how that ramp up in production actually happens. I have no doubt that they will get some of these, maybe all of them, into the people's hands who have reserved them. But we just don't know. There's a lot of unknowns, but I'd say I'm still feeling pretty optimistic. Maybe it's just because I am relatively an optimist, despite a lot of you guys complaining that I complain in a lot of these videos. But I know what I like and I know what I dislike when I look at cars, and that's just me sharing my opinions. In my opinion, I like how this looks. I like how things are implemented. Yes, it's not a super spacious cab, but they did optimize the cab to be the exact same as the Tacoma in like every dimension, which is kind of funny. And the price tag, I mean, you're looking at 40s, low to mid 40s. Realistically, once you spec it, probably upwards to $50,000, which is expensive, but also the average new car price in America is 48. So I feel like if you're undercutting that at all, you're doing, well, it's actually impressive, especially given that it's an EV. But the average truck price in America is 60 grand. So you're actually undercutting the average truck price, even with a maxed out Telo. So there's a lot of ways to look at it, a lot of ways to cut the cake. Curious what you all think, and we'll see you in future content. And of course, future Telo content. That's my hope. I'm hoping once they get this next one running, which I couldn't show you on camera, that'll be really interesting. And also, of course, once they make it to production. Really hope to be one of the first to drive it. That's when Kyle will finally get behind the wheel, because Kyle wasn't able to make it here today, but also he just prefers to drive vehicles once they're actually in production state or close to it. And this one is clearly not really that close to production, but also better than a lot of, you know, mock-ups I've seen in many auto shows. So thanks for watching. Cheers. Oh, and thanks Robert from Aging Wheels for filming me. I really appreciate you holding the camera, making jokes, me trying not to laugh. It's always good.